Oh my God! Hey, so I know I've been promising a wrap-up video of my trip from Rhode Island to Key West. So I've been kind of struggling with what kind of format to do it in. I didn't want to be like sitting in my living room and having you guys listen to me talk. So I thought I'd come out fishing and just give you some statistics. I'll put a lot of stuff into descriptions about the trip and how much fuel I used and whatnot, but I'll talk about some stuff, and then of course you can always ask me questions in the comments and I'll be happy to answer them. I caught one little fluky a little while ago, but I was in closer, kind of in Jamestown. I'm just like out at the mouth of Narragansett Bay here in southern Rhode Island. I want to see how this new Fluffy works with the wind noise. It's not that windy, but I think you'd be able to hear it today, so we shall see. So one of the first things I think I should talk about is like, why did I take the trip? It was a combination of a bunch of things. I like a midlife crisis type of thing, you know, in my 50s now, and just needed an adventure, something different. I'm in the real estate business locally here. It's extremely rewarding helping people find their first homes, or, you know, if they're in a bind and selling their home. So it's a great business, and I get to live in southern Rhode Island, and it's beautiful. So I'm not complaining, but I needed an adventure. So, and the other part was I really thought my son was going to come with me. He's 19, or yeah, he's about to turn 20, and you know, he's had some struggles in his life, as all 19-year-old boys, not all of them, but a lot do these days. And I really thought he would come, so I invited him along. We kind of had like a half a plan to do it together, but then in the end he didn't want to come. So, you know, can't make people do what they don't want to do, especially on a trip like that, because it was a relatively big commitment, you know, month-long commitment. So I didn't feel like it was the right thing. But I also wanted him to teach him, you know, how important it is to follow through when you make a plan, and yes, you set a goal. And yeah, and then like the third reason, so the midlife crisis, my son's issues, and the third reason is like I want to sail the world. So I've lived in this area my whole life, and I actually lived in a neighborhood just a couple miles from here. The neighborhood was on the water, so we'd walk down to the cliff, and I'd always look out and look at the water, and it really, I know it sounds corny, but something drew me to the water. So, and if you're going to live in this world, why not see the entire thing? So that's kind of how I've, you know, that's how the dream kind of came together. While I'm sailing the world, I actually want to, you know, do some good. There's a lot of sailing channels out there, and they do, you know, good things. But a lot of them are just going island to island and, you know, being tour guides and partying or whatever. But I think it would be really rewarding to deliver prescription glasses to the developing world and people that need them. So places that people can't get to, and I'd be able to get to in my sailboat as I enjoy my trip around the world. So I think that'll be sustainable in that, you know, I'll be doing what I love and I'll be helping people out. So anyway, that's a small clip of just, you know, what got me to do the trip and why I did it. I left in mid-November of last year, and it took me 22 days to sail that. Sailing really is my passion. I love my Boston whaler, and but I started with a Hobie Cat. I learned on a catamaran, and I had it up on the neighborhood beach, and we just had a ball on that thing. And just that feeling of harnessing nature and being able to go places. This was before I was even 18. You know, I'd sail over to Newport, and it was is a great feeling to be cutting through the water like that. So yeah, I left in mid-October, and it took me about 22 days to get down there. And I stopped, of course, along the way many times. And I had planned to sleep in a little tent when the weather got warmer, but I was just too exhausted after going 100 plus miles a day. I just couldn't. It was a struggle to even walk to the hotel sometimes. And then I also wanted to do these videos every day, so I didn't want to miss a night, because a lot of people were telling me they were looking forward to it and whatnot. So that was fun, to be able to say, hey, this was my day today to do live videos. There's a lot of sailing channels out there, and some of them are months behind, 6 months, 8 months behind on their journeys, and they put them up on YouTube, and it's okay. They do an amazing job with the editing and whatnot. But I thought it would be cool to have real time, especially if somebody wanted to meet me along the way, or so I got this great group. It's called on Facebook, Everything Boston Whaler, and the people offered to help me out and bring me gas and beers, and you can stay at my place, my dock. So that actually didn't work out until I got to Key West, where I did meet someone from that group, but turns out that he lived in Newport for several years, and he knew a lot of the same people that I knew, so that was kind of fun. Let's see, so I left Narragansett mid-October. My first stop was Milford. So I stopped in Milford because I had a friend that lived there, but it turned out he was flying that day, so he couldn't, he's a chef on somebody's plane, so he wasn't there. But it was it was a nice, easy 80-mile run, and easy enough. And I stayed in like the town dock and the Sheraton that night. I'll put some maps up as I talk about the different days. So day one, stopped in Milford. I went to the Milford town dock, which was $45.20 for my 17-foot whaler, and I put $52.55 in gas in. So I used 14 gallons of fuel for that 80 miles. It was a nice smooth ride to Watch Hill. Then it got chilly and a little bit bumpy, and I was happy to arrive, my little note says. And then I stayed at the Marriott. The next morning I left for New York City, and I remember watching the weather, and there were going to be small craft advisories that day, but they weren't going to happen till like 11 o'clock. So I was like, I'm going to get out early. I'll be out on the boat by 7. And as soon as I came out of the entrance to Milford Harbor, the wind was howling. It wasn't too bad. I mean, I had a couple foot chop across the sound. So what I did was I went directly across the sound. When I say the sound, I'm talking about Long Island Sound. And I went all the way to the north shore of Long Island Sound and got out of the wind and the chop. So that worked out well. But it was foggy and kind of rainy. I'm like, what am I doing? But that turned out to be a really good day, right up through New York and to Hell's Gate. Went right by the Statue of Liberty. And I stayed at the marina there, Liberty Landing. Cost me $85 to dock the boat there. I don't know, was that $5 a foot, maybe more, $5.50 a foot. I took I spent, that was 64 nautical miles and 13 gallons of fuel, and I spent about $55 on fuel too. And then I stayed in this horrible hotel that I took an Uber to. I really thought the door was going to get kicked in on me all night. But it was relative. It was, to be in New York City, I think I only paid $94 to stay in that hotel. So you can imagine how nice that was. I got up really early that next morning. So this is now day 3. And mostly because I wanted to get out of that hotel. I Ubered back to Liberty Landing, jumped on the boat, and had a beautiful, when I left New York Harbor, it was beautiful. Going by the Liberty, it was like surreal. It was early in the morning, and I was expecting some nice north winds, so it was going to be like following seas. But what I didn't take into account was the way those bays interact with each other, and I think that was, the tide was going out, so I was with the tide and the wind, but I think one of those bays empties in there, and it was rough. It was really rough. I was glad that was over. It would only probably lasted like 30 minutes or so of that really rough weather, and then it was a beautiful ride down the coast of New Jersey. I saw dolphins and pelicans, and went right to Atlantic City. I remember I got there and it was warm, relatively warm, felt good, and I made a couple of burgers on the little grill. Yeah, I stayed at the Golden Nugget. The room was relatively cheap, $91, because they want me to gamble. Am I out of focus? But I don't gamble, so they didn't make any money on me. I find those establishments kind of sad. Those casinos. So that whole area, but it was nice enough. Yep, and I'm already in Atlantic City, so I felt pretty good about how much time I was making. And I went from Atlantic City to Cape May. It was only 40 miles, but there were small craft advisories that day. Wind was out. I think the wind was out of the west, and it was cranking. So it was even rough in the intracoastal, but so that was, I used $40 in fuel. I ended up, because those small craft advisories were happening the next day too, so I ended up having to stay an extra day. And that's that day I took the bike ride, if you remember, and I went to get the charger and whatnot. Yeah, there were 40 knot winds here in my notes. So that ended up being kind of an expensive time because it got my phone wet and I lost all that footage, and that was another $100 for that. Anyway, so I stayed 2 days and I swam in the pool, and I thought the weather was going to start getting nicer, and it was still pretty cold. I went from Cape May to Annapolis, technically Stevensville, where I have a cousin there, but on that 6th day. So it was really cold that morning. I left early. The wind, there were kind of light winds, but it was kind of rough going up the Delaware at first. But then again, I got onto that would have been the west shore of the Delaware River, and it smoothed out nice. It was beautiful. I went through the Delaware Canal, the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal, and then when I turned that corner to come down the Chesapeake, the southwest wind, I was expecting this. This wasn't a surprise to me. I knew it was going to be right in my face and kind of a pain, and it was. It took me all day. I did that 126 miles that day. I think it was more like 136 by the time I got around Stevensville and then up this creek to that place that I docked, which was a friend's house. So that worked out really nice because I ended up being there Friday. It was the really hard day to get there, and then Saturday and Sunday, and I left Monday morning. So I'll jumping from day 6, 7, 8, 9. And that was Monday morning, and the wind was howling so much that the wind took all the water out of the little creek that I was staying in the night before. So I ended up, I'm just going to look around, make sure I'm not going to get run over by a tanker as I chat. Yeah, so I ended up having to leave really early the next morning because I knew it would be at least high tide and some of that water would come back. The guy that owned the dock was telling me how that happened sometimes. So that ended up being a really chilly morning because it was so early, but a gorgeous day. I had north winds all the way to Norfolk, and I went 137 nautical miles that day. Yeah, and the Norfolk, I only paid $27 to stay in Norfolk at the marina. I spent $35 on fuel. I think I used 20 gallons for that 140 miles. Because I stopped halfway, and which was almost exactly halfway, 70 miles. I pulled into this, just to get fuel at this little marina, and then I went another 70 miles with that fuel. I'm going to give you all the total numbers at the end. Day 10 was Norfolk to Coinjock. I tried to go through the Dismal Swamp. We remember what happened with that. The guy at the lock was like, you can only go 5 knots or whatever speed. So I ended up turning around. I ended up waiting for the lock first. Met a nice Canadian couple, but I turned around and went the other way. There's 2 ways you can go down. Well, I'm sure there's several ways you can go down through the Intracoastal, but at that point in Norfolk, you kind of have to make a decision. And if you're on a sailboat, you can only motor 5 knots anyway. It doesn't matter, but it mattered to me, to make some time. So that was day 10. Day 11, I went from Coinjock to Beaufort, North Carolina. That was 134 miles. I stayed on Homer Smith's dock in, am I saying Beaufort or Beaufort? Let's see, Beaufort. Because I was in North Carolina, and Beaufort, South Carolina, I believe. Feel free to correct me. So I paid $148 for dockage and fuel at Homer Smith's docks, and I stayed at the Cousins B&B for $140 for the night. My original plan was to go to Oriental that day, but they had no place to put me up to sleep, and they said there was no dockage either. But I know I've been there before. I think they have like a town along the road you can park. I don't know. Anyway, so that was day, and I felt like I was going to run out of fuel that day, but I got within 5 miles of Beaufort before I filled up, and there was still a few gallons left, but that was a little bit nerve-wracking that day. Day 12 and 13, I went from Beaufort, North Carolina to Southport, North Carolina. I stayed at St. James Marina, that beautiful place. I stayed in the lockout. That was 95 nautical miles to get there. I spent $70 in fuel, $75 at the marina, and $236 at the hotel. But I was eating hot dogs and whatnot. And then a friend of mine is a CPA, and she knew a guy that lived there, right in that St. James Plat. So that was really cool. He gave me a ride to CVS, and that worked really well. Worked out well. But I did have to stay there an extra day because the next day was rainy, and I didn't want to beat myself up in the rain. So I stayed 2 nights there. So on day 14, I left Southport and went to Myrtle Beach. That's where my friend Lori met me. That was only 38 miles. I stayed at a real nice marina, the St. James Plantation Marina. We stayed on the water in Myrtle Beach off season. It wasn't too bad, but let's see, a couple of nights. So I stayed there alone the first night, then Lori came in, and then the next morning we left. And that was day 6, so that was 14, 15. So day 16 went from Myrtle Beach to Charleston. That was 95 nautical miles, day 16. Again, I'll put all this stuff in the description as far as all the amounts of fuel and places that I stayed, so this doesn't turn out to be too long of a video. we left Charleston the next day and went to Savannah. We ended up trying to go on the outside, but there were a lot of, again, these like river inlets that made it rougher than I thought it was going to be. Lori was with me. I wanted to kind of take it easy on her, so we ended up ducking inside. So it ended up being 111 miles, Charleston to Savannah, that we traveled. I think it might have been only 90 miles if we had gone on the outside and straight. I prefer to be on the outside. I feel like it's nicer out there. You don't have to worry about no wake zones and that kind of stuff. But it was nice, real nice there. And then, so those were the 3 nights that Lori stayed with me. Then I left Savannah and I made it to Fernandino Beach, Amelia Island actually, and that was 105 nautical miles. I stayed at a little marina there. I took a little Uber 10 minutes away, and that was nice-ish area. I don't know, it wasn't my favorite, but I just did the video, went to sleep, and got up and headed on my way, which is what I did every day, almost every day. And so I left Amelia Island, this is day 19 now, and went to Daytona Beach. That was 96 miles. There was heavy north wind, I remember. It was right behind me. So some of those big bays got quite rough. I was getting banged around quite a bit on those days. I spent 23 gallons in fuel. No, that can't be right. 96 miles. $23 in fuel. I stayed at the Halifax River Marina, and I Ubered back and forth. I just have some of these numbers in here. But I got beat up that day. Just a lot of pounding, like with the tide and the wind. Day 20, I went from Daytona Beach to Vero Beach. That was 105 miles. That ended up being a real nice day. I paid $55 at the marina and $68 for fuel. And I stayed at the Turtle Hotel. Vero Beach is really nice. I had never been there. Real nice. I really liked that area. Day 21, Vero Beach to Fort Lauderdale. I stayed at a friend's house in Fort Lauderdale, so I only had to pay for the marina, but it was $108 at the marina. You know what? It was the boat show in Fort Lauderdale, and I put $75 worth of fuel, 32 gallons worth of fuel. I don't know if that math works either. But I wrote these notes a long time ago, like after I got back from the trip, so they're 3 or 4 months old, so bear with me a little bit. That was day 21, Vero Beach to Fort Lauderdale. And then day 22, I went to Lauderdale to Key Largo. That ended up being a pretty cool trip, but it did get quite rough. I had southeast winds, so it was right on my quarter panel, if you can imagine. And yeah, it was hard to be navigating and controlling the boat and getting splashed at least the water was warm, and it was warm. But I did 81 miles from Lauderdale to Key Largo. I got there, it was real rough in Biscayne Bay. I kind of lost my bearings a little bit, and I went near the shoal that you're not supposed to go because it has eelgrass and whatnot, but luckily I caught myself. I saw these signs that said, "Don't go this way." I was able to get back on track, and I cut through Key Largo. There's a little pass, I forget what they call it now. So I went on the other side of Key Largo, and which would be the east side of Key Largo. I was so exhausted by the time I got there. I stayed there 2 nights. I wanted to, have at least a little energy for my final push to Key West, which would have been day 24. Key Largo to Key West. It was 101 miles. I left early that morning, and I was there. I was in Key West, I think, by noontime. So I was cranking. The wind was perfect. It was out of the north. I was on the lee side of the island, so I was on the west side of all the keys going down, so I was protected from any swell from the Atlantic Ocean. Speaking of swell, someone's wake. Yeah, it was a beautiful day, and that's when I got there. I made that video, and then I met Charlie, who immediately put me on his Boston Whaler and brought me out a Mud Key, I think it's called. We had a great time. Charlie treated me really well, took me out all around Key West and on the boat, and ferried me around and brought me up even to the rental truck, which was, a few islands up the Keys. So at that point I stayed just in Key West for a couple of days. I had to get home. Money was running out, and I rented the truck. I put 6 or 8 pallets in the back of the truck. The marina next door to where I was staying, put it up on forklifts, popped it in. I tied it all down. I had put some cloth underneath on top of the pallet so it wouldn't hurt the bottom of the boat. And I drove home. The first day I left Key West like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I got somewhere to the middle of Florida that first day. Then that second day I got up into Virginia. That was 800 miles I did in that truck. And then the third day I drove home. I got home at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and I stayed in hotel, a couple of nights in the hotels. Yeah, so that was the trip. Yeah, so the truck's, I got the truck home, and then the boat's in the back, but I got to get the truck back to the rental place. So the marina that I had dealt with in the past did the same thing, where they strapped the boat, they put it on the forklift, pulled it out for me. I think I put videos about that up. So in the end, these were the totals. The truck cost me about $1,500, and then about $600 in fuel. So that was pretty expensive to get the truck home, $2,100 plus my time. So I think someone quoted me like $3,500 or something. I was like, oh my gosh, no way, I'll do it myself. But in the end, it was pretty close. I could have flown back and skipped those 3 days, but I spent another couple $100 on hotels because of that. $100 a night for each of those hotels. It cost me $150 to put the boat. No, the other way around. It cost me $129 to put the boat in the truck, and it cost me $150 to take it out of the truck with that forklift. So that trip home alone was $2,500 or something like that. I spent $1,173 on fuel for the trip. That's a big, so people have been asking me that one. So $1,200 around from Rhode Island to Key West, which I thought was pretty reasonable. I think I had estimated $1,400. So with all my stuff in it, I thought that was pretty good. So with everything included, the hotels and the marinas and everything, like that total comes to about $7,700 without food. That doesn't count. That doesn't include food. So $7,700. But of course, I also did some preparation. But I hesitate to even include. Like I bought the Dragonfly Marine. That's $500. A new marine radio. That was a couple $100, and $1,000 worth of other stuff just to prepare. I brought way too much stuff, by the way. If I had stayed in the tent, it would have been great to have a lot of that stuff. I had the generator, and I just didn't want to get caught where I was helpless. So I had a battery charger, I had the generator, the tent, and the blow-up mattress, and all that stuff. And in the end, I didn't use any of it. I had all sorts of line and shackles and whatnot, but I had all the appropriate safety gear. I wore my, that life vest that blows up automatically if you fall in the water. I was clipped in mostly with my little thingamajiggy here. So anyway, So in the end, I think it cost me $9,400. Of course, I still have the Ray Marine and all that gear and stuff. So I don't know. So discounting that stuff, the actual trip cost me $7,700, which is quite a bit more than I anticipated. But I didn't anticipate to stay in the hotels every night. I didn't anticipate being so tired at the end of the day. And it's a lot of work editing the videos, taking out the stuff with too much wind, and so it took me 2 or 3 hours to edit each video. Then you got to upload them, and some of the places the internet was tough, so it was a tiring experience. But I was happy to do it, and again, really happy with all the support I got from all the different my groups of people, people that my friends here in Rhode Island, and then I got friends that are Facebook type friends, and yeah, it was good, really good. I would do it again. People ask me that. Would you do that again? I would definitely do it again. Maybe a bigger boat next time. But when you get a bigger boat, all of a sudden the marinas are more expensive, the fuel's more expensive, so there's, of course, cost to all that stuff. I'm still, when I see people I haven't seen in a while, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that trip, and the support that I've gotten, just overwhelmed. It's really awesome. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. And, there'll be some more adventures to come. I want to talk a little bit about my my goal to sail the world at some point. I'll put a video out about that. And I just finishing up reading this book, Dare to Matter, which has kind of helped me put some of the stuff about my trip into perspective. And yeah, so I'll put a separate video about that out. And thank you very much. Appreciate you watching, and it's been an incredible time. I just put that video out where I went to Martha's Vineyard for that adventure. I can't believe I forgot my drone. So I don't have any aerial footage, so I'm going to do that adventure again. Nantucket's a little bit further. That would have to be an incredible weather window I'd have to see to want to make that trip, or to feel safe going on that trip. But we'll be doing some fishing this summer. I like to go out and see the dolphins and the whales far out. And I'll tell you how I prepare for that stuff and how I watch the weather. And we'll take it from there. There's no fish in this ocean. Hey, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, subscribe. Yeah, make a comment. Ask me a question. I'm happy to answer them. I answer almost everybody. And we'll take it from there. See you next time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe.